Hi, this is Faith Jones from Fresh Lemons Quilt, and today we're going to talk about how to trim and square up a split quarter square triangle unit. This is our second year in a row at the Summer Sampler Series where we've had a block with one of these units, and they can give people a bit of a frustrating time to trim up. So we did a video last year, and I thought I'd do a little bit more of a generic video this year that you can use depending on any size unit that you make. So we have our finished unit here, and we're going to trim that up. First, I want to talk a few seconds about the ruler I like to use. I have a lot of different branded rulers. For trimming up this or say an hourglass unit, which would be similar, but your seam would go all the way across here as well. I like these Omni Grip rulers in particular because if you can see, within each square inch here, you have these dots, and they mark every quarter of an inch within the inch square. So you'll see in a minute why I find those so handy. So squaring up these units does involve a little bit of math. All you have to do really is to be able to divide by 2. So you can do it in your head, or you can use a calculator if you need to, but that's really the one number you need to know is you need to know your final block size, unit size, and this we want to square up to 4.5 inches. And you need to know what is half of 4.5 inches. So half of 4.5 inches is 2.25 inches. So those are the two numbers that need to be in your mind when you're squaring this unit up. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to take our ruler, and we have this diagonal here, and I'm going to put it on this diagonal seam between the two quarter square triangles. Now we know we want our block to end up 4.5 inches, which would be this line here. And we know half of 4.5 is 2.25. And like I said with those dots, this is on the diagonal, this is 2.25. This would be 2 inches. One more dot is the 2.25. The 2.25 is the center of your block. So that dot is right here in the middle where your seams intersect, 2.25. The other two important markings, we want this to be a 4.5 inch block. So we want the 4.5 inch marking here to be on your diagonal seam, and the 4.5 inch marking here to be on this diagonal seam. So we have 4.5, 2.25, 4.5, all while we have the diagonal line on the ruler going through this diagonal seam. It's in the right spot. So we're going to trim the first two sides. Okay. Now we're going to flip our unit. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to mark up the diagonal on the seam. It should be a lot easier on the second two sides because we've already trimmed this, so I have my 4.5 inch line here. 4.5 is on the seam, and 4.5 is on this seam, on this corner. 2.25 is in the middle of the block. So we have all of our checkpoints, 1, 2, 3, and this diagonal line, 4. We're going to trim here. We have a perfect 4.5 inch split quarter square triangle. Now you might wonder, well, that's great for my 4.5 inch block. What if my block needs to be 3.5 inches? You would trim it the exact same way, except if you say your block is 3.5 inches, half of that is 1 3/4. So you would find the dot on 1 3/4, make sure that's where your seams intersect, put the diagonal on the seam, make sure your 3.5 inch markings are here and here. And I'm just going to trim it since I'm not going to use this block for anything. Flip it around. Same thing. Diagonal goes between the quarter square triangles. The 3.5 inch markings are on the seams. Let's trim it up. In the 1 3/4, sorry. Actually, let's do it this way so you can see a little better. Well, maybe you can see it here. You can see 1 3/4 1 inch, 1 1/4, 1 2/4, 1 3/4 right there. Just trim that up. Now our block is 3.5 inches. You can do it again. Say you want your finished block to be 2.5 inches. Same story. Half of 2.5 is 1 1/4. So I'm going to mark 1 1/4 dot on the middle. I have the diagonal along my diagonal. I have 2.5 inches on the seam and 2.5 inches on that seam. Oops. Don't do what I'm doing. Okay. Okay, on the side, 2.5 on the seams, on the seam corners. 1 1/4, which is half of 2.5 as the middle dot, and the diagonal through the diagonal. And so on and so on. You can see that's the easy way to trim.